Good afternoon. Welcome to this next to the last session of the Contemporary Artist Books Conference. I'm Jenny and I'm with Nicholas and Karina representing the organizing committee of the conference. We'll also act as the host and tech support for this session. The conference has been held since 2008 and this year is organized by the wonderful Center for Book Arts as part of the Printed Matter Virtual Art Book Fair. We'd like to thank the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts for their generous support of the Center for Book Arts Criticism Initiative and for making the conference possible. Additional thanks to our conference sponsors, the Brooklyn Rail, Sorted Library, and Small Editions. The Center for Book Arts and the usual in-person space of the conference are on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging and uplifting the Munsee Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations and the lands in which you're tuning in from. Following this talk at 4:30, the conference concludes with a plenary about actionable ideas and recommendations that you, me, and everyone else has accumulated during the conference. These topics will be posted on the website along with a progress and conclusions over the coming year. You may know that the session is being live streamed on the Printed Matter Virtual Artist Books conference webpage, and you're also being recorded. The whole session will be posted on the Center for Book Arts website after the conference. If you have questions during the session, please use the chat. We'll be accumulating them, distilling them, and posting them on your behalf towards the end. Let me mention that because the final session is at 4:30, we're going to try and end right at 4:15. But you'll see in the chat, there's going to be a Zoom room posted so that we can continue off camera and do whatever for another 15 or so minutes. Let me mention that you'll be muted throughout the talk, and we also ask that you keep your camera off. You're also welcome to chat with your fellow attendees. I think it's a wonderful new feature of Zoom conferences, these cross conversations that get started. We could never do that before. We will also be posting relevant links during the talk. If you need any assistance, please send a private message to anyone with CABC in their name listing. I'll now turn it back over to Nicholas to introduce our moderator.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So hi, everybody. So our moderator, Andrea is Andrea Kohashi. She's a book artist and teaching and learning librarian in special collections and archives at Virginia Commonwealth University. Her areas of interest include book art creation, research, and scholarship, as well as engagement with primary source materials. Kohashi holds an MA in Library and Information Science and MFA in Book Arts from the University of Iowa. So without further ado, I hand it over to Andrea. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So thank you to the Center for Book Arts and CABC for hosting this panel, and thanks to you all for attending. I'm going to start off by adding to the land acknowledgement on behalf of the panel. So we come to you from our homes in Washington, D.C., Southern Maryland, Northern and Central Virginia, occupied lands of the Algonquin peoples. We humbly offer our respects to the elders, past and present citizens of Anacostan, Chesapeake, Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nantego, Pamunkey, Piscataway, Powhatan, and Rappahannock cultures. While a land acknowledgement is not enough, it is an important social justice and decolonial practice that promotes Indigenous visibility and a reminder that we are on sacred land. Let this land acknowledgement be an opening for all of us to contemplate the ongoing struggles to resist colonial indoctrination through various Indigenous movements for identity, sovereignty, and self-determination. Today, I'm going to begin with a brief introduction to the 2020 project with bios of the participating panelists, which you can see streaming right now on their screens. We'll then hear from 5 of the 9 artists who will discuss their histories, identities, and motivations as they relate to the collaboration. There will be time at the end of the session for audience questions, as mentioned before, and we'll also drop a link to the 2020 blog and PDF in the chat with project and contact information. So without further ado, as mature Black women artists, the 9 collaborators have experienced racism, sexism, and ageism in promoting and exhibiting their work. Responding to these intersecting vectors of oppression and exclusivity, in 2020, each of the 9 artists created an initial bookwork as an instrument of resiliency, contextualizing their art within a framework that includes historic and contemporary Black women leaders and creatives. Over the course of 8 months, each book has passed through the hands of all the artists who have responded to the accumulation of ideas and creative expressions already within. At least once a month, the participants meet in person and virtually to discuss their work. They have 1 monthly rotation left. And I'm going to do a brief bio introduction of each of the artists. Adjoa Burrowes is a visual artist, author, and art educator. She has illustrated over 17 books and has created book illustrations for small presses nationwide, including Third World Press, Africa World Press, and Creative Teaching Press. Burrowes earned a BFA in printmaking from Howard University and an MA in art education from the Corcoran College of Arts and Design. Her prints, mixed media works, and paper sculptures have been exhibited all over the US and are represented in collections at the Banneker Douglas Museum of Culture and History, Pyramid Atlantic Center, Brooklyn Art Library, Art Collé Museum and Collage in Plymouth, France, and Verbeek Foundation in Belgium. Julee Dickerson-Thompson is an award-winning artist known for her distinctive pen and ink illustrative style. Julee's mixed media experiments with solved sculptures, quilts, and doll making are influenced by her travels to West Africa, the Bahamas, Cuba, France, and the American South. Her love for mixed media and books resulted in authoring, illustrating, and publishing 3 children's books: The Dance of the Rain Gods, Brown Spice's ABC book, and The Butterfly Trip. Dr. Pamela Lawton is an artist, educator, scholar with over 25 publications, 70 juried exhibitions, and 50 peer-reviewed conference presentations. Her artworks, which she calls art stories, are primarily prints, books, and assemblages influenced by her upbringing in an intergenerational family and life experiences as a Black woman artist educator. Her books are in the Tate Britain Library and the Cabell Library at Virginia Commonwealth University. Her prints are in the art collections of 9 universities, the Frederick Douglass Museum and Cultural Center, the Washington, D.C. Superior Court, Lazarus House, and the Colonel Eugene E. Myers Charitable Unit Trust. Francine Haskins has exhibited widely in museums and galleries across the United States and has been a part of numerous panels on folk art and folklore. She is one of the founding members of the legendary 1800 Belmont's Artists Collective. Haskins is renowned for her quilts, soft sculpture dolls, note cards, and wearable art, but it is her children's books, I Remember 121 and Things I Like About Grandma, that have brought her the broadest amount of fame, allowing her work to delight children and adults alike. Currently, she continues to explore and evolve creatively. Her work is featured at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in the museum shop. Gail Shaw-Clemons is an artist, educator, activist working in printmaking, drawing, and mixed media. Her handmade and published artist books speak to her concern for humanity as it relates to history and the present, with hopes for a better tomorrow. She has been awarded artist residencies in Africa, Sweden, Ireland, Pennsylvania, and Mexico. Her work is in collections in China, Brazil, Switzerland, the Library of Congress, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, Ballinglan Museum in the Republic of Ireland, and the Banneker Douglas Museum, the David Driscoll Center, and the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities Art Bank. All right, I'm going to stop the slideshow and we'll jump into our questions. So to get us started, can you tell us about how the project came to be and what brought you all together? And how has the current moment informed the creation and direction?
Okay, I guess I'll begin. The project, the seed of it anyway, was actually conceived in April of 2020 in another small DC artist collective called WOA, Women of an Undetermined Age. And this was all mid-career practicing artists. And in one of our monthly meetings, we talked about starting a project that would allow us to respond visually to what was going on in the world and the resulting social political trauma that resulted, including the social isolation, which was really real for many of us. So 3 of the women, Gail Shaw-Clemons, who's on this panel, Aziza, Claudia, Gibson, Hunter, and myself were part of that collective, WOA. And we decided to move forward with the books. And Gail will talk more about the book idea after me. So the 3 of us, we had to invite 2 other artists that we knew, respected, and trusted to be a part of the group. The total became 9. I invited Pamela, sitting on the panel also, Pamela Walton, who I knew from grad school at the Corcoran College of Art and Design in DC. While at the Corcoran, she headed the art education department. I took 4 classes from her. I traveled to Mexico with her on a project with her social justice art education class, and worked on several intergenerational collaborative projects. She was definitely one of my top choices. And I also brought in artist educator Kamala Subramanian, who I knew from yet another collaborative when we were undergraduates. I was at Howard University, and she at the University of Maryland. Now that printmaking collective was called Saba. And incidentally, Gail Shaw-Clemons was also a part of that collective. We were all printmakers. So, there were these really strong ties between us. And I can safely say all 9 of us had these amazing connections with each other that spanned, in many cases, decades. So what happened in the beginning of the worldwide crisis and the trauma that came out of it definitely informed the creation and the direction of the project from day one, as evidenced by the themes that we embraced in our books, from resistance and resilience to police brutality, masks as symbols of survival and pain, to names as armor and shield for Black people.
Okay, so as Adjoa said that I was a part of the other group, and I was talking to Aziza about my experience participating in an international handmade book project while I was teaching at the United Nations International School in New York. They sent me to an ECIS conference in Amsterdam. While there, I joined a group of European artists who planned a handmade book exchange, me being the only American in the group. Because we didn't really know each other, we started a blog so that we could communicate with each other about our books. The process fascinated Aziza, and she said, let's do it. Starting with the 3 of us, Adjoa, Aziza, and myself. Again, we brought in 2 artists apiece, and then we made a list of the artists to follow for the order of the exchange. My selection were 2 artists from New York, Michelle Godwin and Gloria Patton, who I had the pleasure of spending 2 weeks. Did something happen? 2 weeks at an artist in residency in Soaring Gardens, Pennsylvania. So it was coincidental that we ended up with 9 people, 9 months, and 9 books. We didn't realize that until midway in the project. But anyway, we will birth these babies next month.
Great, thank you. So thinking about this project, what made the medium of the artist book specifically appropriate for the project? I think we'll get started with Francine.
Well, the artist book is a good tool for self-expression, and it's a collaborative process. And with painters, printmakers, quilters, mixed media artists, so that medium allows us to do whatever we want to. All the things we've learned through the years to create our story with words, without words. It's experimental, educational, functional, decorative, and it's healing because we've gone through, not just this year, but we've gone through a lot through our lives that we've seen. And this year we've been able to look back. I know I have, because I kind of put a hold on what I was doing, and because for 35 years I've been on the hustle. So this project came and just it's helping me get through the year. And since we have 9 different artists and 9 books, we're able to pick and choose what we want to do. And it's a good teaching tool for seniors, senior citizens, and little kids, because it's a visual tool.
Great. And Julie? Oh. Julie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Okay. This has been a wonderful experience. It was certainly a 911 rescue at the beginning of Project 2020, and it spoke to me immediately because I've always had a passion for books, and the idea of artist books was a wonderful new discovery a few years back that has been growing. So I have really loved the idea of creativity within the artist books and a way to just go beyond the borders of a traditional book. And that was part of what they asked us to do. So the books themselves just invited a lot of not only creativity, but a lot of thought, not just because of the form that they took, but because of the mission that they set out for each and every one of us. I also found that during this period, it was a wonderful way to chronicle what was going on. When Aziza came to Francine and myself and said, this is about, it's called Project 2020, we all thought Corona was going to be over a few months later. Well, ha, ha, ha. So we didn't know Black Lives Matter was going to become an issue that become as volatile and as frightening and as horrifying as it has become today. And for me to be in Francine's book, a witness in the midst of it all in the month of November when there was an election brewing, and I mean brewing, it was a wonderful place to document my emotions, to add my prayers, to bring my thoughts, and also to share from the moment to moment, what was going on in the world. So it has followed through to 2021 and the drama has not stopped, but I think that our books, it's interesting, they have sparked art activism, not just among colleagues, but certainly among the young people. And it's very exciting to see. I hope the books will continue to do so. So that's why I'm here.
Great, thanks. And Pam?
I would say as artists and educators, we're storytellers. And so in that role, we listen and observe the stories unfolding around us. And then we reflect on our own stories of lived experience, memories, loved ones, and of the marginalized people like ourselves. And these stories become inspiration for our work. The book form seems most appropriate to me because while books hold knowledge and invite participants into the stories to engage with, learn from, and connect with their own experiences, they are public and private forms that they can be both intimate, one-to-one conversations with the participant, yet also open to the public for all to react to, kind of like viewing a painting or a print or sculpture in a public space.
Great, thanks. And Adjoa?
Well, artist books are really unique and great. They're very fluid and it's a really flexible medium, which we felt was perfect for the artists in our group who work with so many different materials and processes in their art practice. We are bookmakers, we're painters, we're printmakers, doll makers, and mixed media artists. And we embrace this medium, bookmaking, as a powerful way to tell our stories as Black women artists living through the multiple crises and traumas of 2020.
Thanks. And last but not least, Gail.
Can you guys
Yep.
hear me?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the book format presents a cohesive package that would house the collection of each other's works. The size of the books made it easy for us to finish a piece within the month allotment that we had. And also it was easy to send it out because it wasn't so big and heavy and all of that, but I'm not sure about right now. It kind of doubled in size and thickness. And let's see, what else did I say? Okay, and then it presented a platform for us to tell our story of 2020. So I think those are some of the important parts. Okay. I can't.
I think you're muted, Andrea.
I might have. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. Speaking of your histories and the medium of the artist books, what were your first experiences working with artist books, and how do those experiences inform the current project and the current work that you're doing? We'll start off with Adjoa.
Okay. Well, oopsie, can you hear me? My first experiences working with artist books was as an art educator, designing and developing residencies with the Kennedy Center. I had this My Telling Your Own Stories workshop, which involved students creating their own visual and written narratives. And I came to this teaching through my work as a children's book writer and illustrator. And I also did a lot of work with the National Museum of Women in the Arts at a time when they were developing this artist book curriculum for third grade, resulting from a 3-year grant they got from the Department of Education. So I conducted, multiple workshops in DC and Virginia in public schools, along with other writers and local artists. And one of my residencies culminated with an exhibition of student work, and it ended up at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. The work that the kids did was absolutely incredible. These young people sculpted and created books that looked like shoes and birthday cakes and animals and peoples. It was just amazing. So detailed and intricate. And, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, it has one of the biggest collections of artist books made by women in the nation and maybe even in the world. And so I was really lucky that I had access to these books, such as the exhibit they had called The Book as Art. And I just fell in love with the book form. And then my work with Pyramid Atlantic Art Center as an outreach associate. So I did residencies, or not residencies, but workshops, bookmaking and papermaking workshops with schools in DC and Maryland. And I also in turn took workshops at Pyramid. So I was able to learn about a lot of different art forms. And finally at the Corcoran, in Pam's classes, she required us to create artist books all the time. I mean, and we learned a lot of different techniques to transform pages of a book by burning them, printing on them, painting them, even blowing bubbles on them, folding, tearing, and altering them in so many ways. So I learned about really a lot about altered books. So by the time the project came around, I mean, I was fully aware of the breadth of possibilities in the medium and just so excited to explore.
Great. And Gail.
Okay, so the first, my first bookmaking experience was, I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was pregnant, I think for like 2 years, it felt like. And I was alone. I was, just my family, and I didn't know anyone. And so this, the Coast to Coast Women of Color National Artist Book Project came up. And I participated in that, and it just saved my life. I mean, I could communicate with someone outside of Wisconsin. And so I participated in the book, in the project. And the collection of books became a traveling exhibition, and it was accompanied by a catalog written by Faith Ringo. And so my handmade book was made from lithographic prints turned into collages. My book spoke to the self-destruction of mankind and his environment. And the name of the book was Who Will Love My Babies When the World Dies? And so after that, I just started making a lot of just blank books. And whenever I got a chance to travel, I would use them as journals. So I have lots of books that have been written on one whole side, accordion style, and the back. So at some point, I'd like to get them translated into a book of some sort. But they make really nice journals as well.
Great, thank you. And Francine? Francine, you're on mute.
Can you hear me? They're shaking their head. I can't hear me. Started as a painter, went into the characters from my paintings, turned into dolls, quilts. I was teaching doll making, quilt making, and one of my students, Kyra Hicks, who's a quilter, book researcher, challenged me to make books. So I took the things that I had, paper, doll images, and start creating just by looking at the books and the whole idea of what the possibilities were. And that was the beginning. Handmade papers, decorative, different things help me to see an image or a book. You can fold a piece of cardboard and I can see the book and add all the things that I learned to go in it. So I always do a challenge to the people that come to my studio to present. And so it's always like a little collective. And I've been teaching, never had the, what do you call it? Formal teaching of the books, but I take classes and figure it out. And this project, when Aziza said 12 by 12, I had 12 by 12 canvas. I didn't think that I could do something smaller. I just did a wide canvas and did an accordion book because I was working on a piece of art that showed a street of a community, and I wanted to put that in my book. So my book actually stands up like a community. It goes from the front to the back with whatever my Dandelion sisters choose to add. So it's going to be real interesting to see it when it comes back. I've seen it once, but just to have all that great energy in my space.
Thanks. And Julie? Julie, you're on mute.
I don't know why. Sorry about that. I didn't mute myself. But anyway, I, like everyone else, I've had that passion for books. And in working with bookmaking and working with children, we do a lot of storytelling and a lot of creative things. So also when I actually did my original drawings for artwork for the Dance of the Rain Gods, it was so much fun, but also really beautiful in the original state. the printed state was very nice, but there's nothing like an original. You know, the internet is wonderful, but we're missing the richness and the wonder of the actual illustrations, the actual fine art side of it. And then to take that into the idea of the creativity of beyond what I was able to do in a regular published book, of opening and changing and mutating, and the altered books. I learned that from children. I didn't teach it to them. I learned it from a class where they were showing me, and had a ball with it. And then entered into the world where we support each other as artists. And I bought one of Francine's books, her handmade books, and she said, you can come and be in my class. So I went and took her class and found it really liberating, because it went beyond paper, it went into fabric, it went into sewing, and it went in, and she has the same rules I do, which is like, just kind of allow the book organically to tell you its own story. I also found it was a wonderful way to amplify the messages that I felt inside. So I don't know if I'm able to show it, but one of the books was Resist, Exist, Assist. I have another one that's all about ancestral colors, and just able to do some really creative things with the pockets. And also, ironically, using that at a time when I didn't think things would be as bad as they are now, to share my messages, to try and make a difference, to tell more than just a story with the book. That was a big part of it for me. So I think that all of that has led into just a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for deadlines, because my 52 books are still waiting to be finished, but with the Dandy 9 and this wonderful message of strength and endurance and persistence, we are able to finish on time and do a critique and do a sharing and all kinds of important things that come beyond just creating a book.
Great. And Pam?
I'll say my first introduction was like in the mid-90s, and it was through altered books. I had a colleague who had approached me about doing a call and response with an altered book, and I had never heard of it. And this was like the late 90s, and she was telling me that she was going to send me something. Well, it never happened, but I kept thinking about it. And when I graduated from Columbia with my doctorate in 2003, 2004, two of my best friends, I think one is on the call, we were just kind of inundated by not being able to have time to make art, because now we were like, teaching, and we were in a new career. And so I said, well, this isn't good. We have to do something. So I had seen an article about these three artists. One was in Brooklyn. I think two were in Brooklyn and one was in Ireland. Anyway, they made this sketchbook, and each one did a page, and then they mailed it to the next artist. They didn't say what it was about. They just had the person respond. And reading that article really intrigued me. So I wound up making this altered book called The Adventures of Pamela. And it was about my journey into this career as a college educator. And I mailed it off to my two friends who were both at institutions in Illinois. And it took about a year for me to get it back. But I think it was really fun, it's just to see how they responded to what their life was like at the moment. And that book then spawned the assignment that Adjoa was talking about. I started using it in my teaching as kind of like altered book journals, where students could either respond to a social justice issue, or they could use it to respond to readings and discussions from class, and just another fun thing, another different way of expressing their thoughts and reflections. And then I would say that continued when I was doing the associate artist piece at the Tate in 2019. I decided to do an altered book project, and I was in Edinburgh at the time. And it's a very literary city. So I went to all the charity shops and I bought all these old books, most of them written from like a master narrative perspective. And then for 5 days, I was in London at the Tate, and I asked people to pick up a book and alter it any way they wanted. They had all kinds of materials on the table. And so people tore out pages. We then inserted them back in. but I had 1,800 people in 5 days create 30 altered books. And that's what's at the Tate Britain Library at the moment. So it was just it was a crazy time, but it was a wonderful thing to do. So that was my introduction to the book and as an art form. And since then, I have continued to make altered books. I've enjoyed letterpress printing, and as Andrea knows, I was in a letterpress class at VCU and created a story from my family. So my family's always been a big influence. And it's kind of like a child's book. And I wrote the story, I illustrated it with wood engravings, and then set all the type in letterpress. And that's the book that's at the VCU library collection. So I'll stop it there. And anyway, all of this, impacted what I was doing with this project. When Adjoa asked me, I will admit, I told her, I said, Adjoa, I haven't made any art for a little bit because 2020 is really depressing me. And she said, come on, Pam, you need to do this. And she was right. We did need to do this. And if you've heard us referring to ourselves as the Dandy Nine, it's because several of us have been thinking about, as Black women, being thought of like a weed, the thing you don't want in your garden that keeps popping up. But we're strong, we're resilient, we have great dandelions, and weeds have great medicinal properties. And so, because there are 9 of us, we just kind of started calling ourselves the Dandy Nine.
Great, thanks, Pam. So I know as you all have been meeting every month, you've been talking a lot about what you're doing, and that there's a lot of ideas and contemporary critical theory that's come up. So can you talk about the relationship of the project to the contemporary critical theory that you've been thinking about? I mean, we're gonna start with Pam.
Okay, so there were a lot of critical theories that we could relate to this whole project and are working in it. But the one that I'm particularly going to talk about is basically critical race theory. And basically that started in the legal field, but it's sort of like counter narratives as a way of bringing visibility to what people who are marginalized experience every day in their lives and throughout history. So race continues to be a significant factor in determining inequity in our country, and US society is based on property rights. And the intersection of race and property creates sort of like this analytical tool through which we can understand social inequity. And so CRT uses story as a means of making these inequities more visible by suggesting that the claims of neutrality, objectivity, things like colorblindness and meritocracy can be challenged by naming one's own reality or voice. And I really feel like that's what we're doing with this project, as things have been happening in the world that have just really gotten stuck with us. The only healthy way in many ways to get that out was through our creative forum. And because we were doing this project, when we get to the point where we finish that last rotation and start exhibiting these books, you'll see that there are interesting moments throughout that 9 months, ranging from the Black Lives Matter movements, violence against people all the people that we've been talking about. I'm not just going to call all their names out, but anyway, all the violence, police violence. And then on the more hopeful end of that trauma, the election of the first Black and Southeast Asian woman vice president. So there was this, up and down, and it's all there in the books because it's what was happening at the time. So basically those stories, those George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Kamala Harris, those stories are interwoven with our own stories of experience as older Black women and artists. And so those stories have become a way for us to bring out what we feel about what's going on and feel empowered about times that are actually very traumatic and can be very disempowering. So it's one way that for us to speak our truth to power. And anyway, critical race theory.
And Adjoa?
All right. I think one of the theoretical frameworks that our project kind of exemplified was within the socio-cultural dimension of transformative learning theory. And transformative learning, it's been said, is about change in the way we see ourselves and the world we live in. And Project 2020, I think, kind of embodies a transformative learning framework as art practice in 3 different ways. And firstly, I think as artists, the conditions in which we created the work required constant adaptation, transforming us as practitioners along the way. I mean, we had instances where we had delayed and lost mail packages, and restrictions in our in-person gatherings, and just plain old fatigue, were some of the barriers that we had to overcome during the project. And because the collective was made up of women at a very, very specific intersection, we were really trying to create social support for each other. So it also fulfills the social emancipatory aspect of transformative learning, and ultimately awakening our consciousness as artists through highlighting the ways in which our shared identity impacts our lives as artists and people in a broader sense. And secondly, the artifacts themselves are examples of transformative learning in that they kind of follow an exquisite corpse kind of art model, which is defined by the continual transformation of a work of art by the artist participating in the project. And so each book began with the artist's choice of form. And we had a variety of different forms, from altered books to the codex to sculptural books, box forms. So we chose the form, the narrative, the media, and the theme. And with each monthly rotation, each artist was free to add their contribution within the artist's original book format. So the resulting books were so rich and varied, and they're still in the making, and a visual testament to our cumulative learning and the strength of our bond. And then artist book, it plays on books as a medium that epitomize learning. And one of the key aspects of transformative learning is dialogue, critical dialogue with others as a means of deconstructing assumptions. And through making art together and engaging in conversations about our perspectives and approaches, us artists, we engage in this kind of practice. We learn from one another in ways that are both transformative and empowering. We had these monthly social distance book exchanges, our little magical meetups, allowing us to interact in person. This ritual was especially poignant for those isolating alone at home during COVID-19. And regrettably, as the pandemic worsened, our in-person meetings were changed to just simple drop-offs and runs outside of our homes. And though frequent video meetings kind of allowed us to continue to create a continuity. And thirdly, through our public blog, and we're going to later give you the link to that, and the work itself, we demonstrated transformative learning in the relationships between ourselves as artists, our work, and the audience, ultimately seeking to awaken consciousness within our audience on the various social political themes that we all tackle. And then, in addition, the benefits of this particular art practice was highlighted through the blog posts where we each shared our work in progress, the finalized art, all the discoveries we made along the way, and the research we did about our topics.
Thanks, Adjoa. Gail? Gail muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Oh, so you couldn't before?
No.
Okay, so let me get started. I'm here twice for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, so my critical theory is about feminism and how it has to be redefined. So as a Black woman, it was difficult for me to consider myself a feminist because I never really felt that movement was that inclusive. However, bell hooks, an outspoken professor, author, activist, and cultural critic, drew attention to how feminism privileges white women's struggle. She proposed a new definition of feminism while advocating for a more holistic way of understanding oppression. Her writing has been the intersectionality of race, capitalism, and gender, and what she describes as their ability to produce and perpetuate systems of oppression and class domination. She has addressed race, class, and gender in education, art, history, sexuality, mass media, and feminism. Our books speak to those isms and how they translate into those inequities that reared their ugly heads during the pandemic to expose the fragilities of Black and Brown communities. In her book, All About Love, New Visions, Hooks strips away love's hero cloak of sex, romance, and desire. The famed feminist theorist instead asks that we consider love as a verb, not just a noun. A verb asks for concrete action. When we see love as a combination of trust, commitment, care, respect, knowledge, and responsibility, we can work on developing these qualities, or we can learn to extend them to ourselves, she writes. We have to nurture our own spiritual growth, and as well as that of others. She states, you must always love yourself enough to believe what you have to say has value and that your voice matters. Our group, as well as bell hooks, are dealing with social oppression through art, literature, and writing.
Thank you, Gail. And Julie?
Okay, let's get me unmuted.
You're unmuted.
Uh-oh, did I mute myself?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, let's try this. I thought I was talking about feminism too, and I'm just going to continue down that road because it was a very dear subject to me. Now, Pam gracefully wrote for us the race-centric approach to transformative learning is particularly poignant for the Artists in Project 2020 because it speaks to the way in which the intersection of racism and sexism, and we add ageism, the gray hair, as another element, they transform the ways in which Black women think, exist, and view the world. To foster transformative learning, this perspective promotes inclusion of, and I'm going to delete the rest of that quote and just say marginalized voices. I found this subject particularly important, although I'm not a feminist by any means, because my daughter had just given me the book Hood Feminism for Christmas by Mickey Kendall. And it is a really strong book. It is a really powerful book in these days and times, and I recommend that everybody, particularly feminists, read it. For Black women, it's nothing new. It's what we've known all along. And for me, when women get together in a group, my roots go all the way back to, unfortunately, and I'm going to shout out the godmamas at this moment, high school, all girls school, college, all school, girls school. What was I thinking? You know? So at the end of my fourth year of college, I decided to do a project about Black women. And I had grown up as a child of the civil rights movement, as a teenager in the Black movement, and then came the women's lib movement. So that was my college experience, the women's lib movement, but it didn't speak to me. And so when I went and did an Ebony Woman poem, it was a slideshow about women in Africa, women in the United States. I wasn't even familiar with the Caribbean in those days, although it was all around me, and where we were at that point in time and where we wanted to go. And I learned years later that the experience of being with these women was so empowering, so wonderful, that even though I thought I hated those experiences, the bonds of women coming together, powerfully coming together, importantly coming together. We heard it yesterday in the broadcast when they talked about the fact that Black women have been at the foundation of so much of what has been accomplished in this country, not just for Black people, but for all people in terms of movements. And the suffragists came to them and said, we need your voice. And then when they got to the voting polls, guess what they did? They went with the white supremacist movement and left them behind. And that's the struggle that we are seeing again today, but we stuck behind Kamala Harris. And by the way, we have our own Kamala. Shout out to Kamala Subramanian in our Dandy 9, celebrating that same legacy and telling those same stories. And here she is as the vice president now today. And beyond all that tried to hold her down and tried to hold her back. And that's why we call ourselves the Dandy 9, because it's about that resilience. And when Mickey Kendall writes about it, she talks about the differences, and the important difference comes back to me for womanism versus feminism. It's about childcare, healthcare, poverty. It's not about trying to overcome our men. It's trying to work with them because they've been pushed down. We're propping them up. We're not trying to, be there without them. So the issues are very different. We're not trying to get a job. My mother was trying to be able to be home with her child. We would like to be paid for the job. We'd like to be able to get the jobs we want to get, but we're not looking to be the maid for somebody so they can go out and work. And I think that that's something that people really have to start to look at. And working with this group of women has just been awesome. It's been another sisterhood. It's been another chance to make a difference through our art, through our activity, through our coming together, healing, helping, touching, and pushing each other's art forward through this experience. So it's been great. That's my feminist story.
Thanks, Julie. And we're reaching the conclusion of sort of the planned questions, but you touched on this a little bit, Julie, but how do you envision the future of the project and where the directions this might go? Gail, we can see you now, Gail. So if you want to get...
What happened? Okay, well, let's see. Well, we've already written a lot of proposals and we have several exhibitions coming up. So what I see are perhaps workshops. It may be a compilation of a published book of all of our creations. And let's see. And hopefully collaborating again on something else. I'm not really sure yet, but I'm sure we'll come up with something. And I think that these books have given us a lot of inspiration to even create new work for our individual selves. So.
Great. Thanks, Gail and Francine.
Ms. Gail took a lot of my poems. Workshop of the book. I want everybody to make a doll and incorporate a doll. I'm a doll maker. I make dolls from all kinds of things. So I want to see what they do with a piece of found metal, a tree branch, a bottle, all the things I use because I know they can do it.
Thanks, Francine and Julie.
I would love to see another creative project. I can't wait to see the exhibit. We have already promised everybody that the books will be published and everybody will be able to get one. It won't be like the original, but I can't wait to see those books come out. And I just look forward to doing something else exciting with these brilliant artists. That's, maybe
Julie.
international. Am I muted?
No, you're not, Pam.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing for me is I'm looking forward to actually working with these amazing women in person, and the idea of doing workshops for each other. So I was telling them I have this little letterpress. I would love for them to come over and do that. I want to go over to Francine's studio and learn how to make dolls and just, have that fellowship just for us to learn more from each other after being so intrigued by what people have been putting in the books, and just continuing to learn as a lifelong learner, what different media that I would like to learn from them, because they're just amazing.
Great, thanks, Pam. And Audrey.
Well, I would like to see us do some outreach in the community, opening the project up, especially in, marginalized communities, to do some collaborations. Also, because, of my research interests, to do some more writing, and each of us journaling about the experience. I think it actually would make a really cool book, each of our stories behind the books, because there's a lot of stories behind the book. So that's what I'm looking forward to, as well as making new art and learning more things. And when the pandemic allows us to open up to be able to, like Pam, visit each other's studios and collaborate more fully.
Thanks, Adjoa. We're at the end of the questions that we had planned, but I'm gonna open it up to audience questions. And I also have one question that sort of came up in one of the last sessions that would apply to your project, but I'm also gonna redrop the link to the blog in the chat, and then drop a PDF document, a one-page document about the project in the chat as well. So before I drop those things in, I guess I'll direct for the first question. How do we bring this work specifically, and this is brought up by Karina, how do we bring this work into the conversation of art criticism, and how or whether we should introduce, do you have ideas about how or whether we should introduce this work to critics? And if not, you all touched on this in sort of your ideas for the future of the project, do you suggest an alternative platform to bring critical dialogue, recognition, and preservation to the work itself?
I guess I'd like to approach that. I'm totally open to criticism, or to critique of our work and other folks' work like ours. One of the things that drove me, so when I was a graduate student at Howard, working on my MFA, one of the people that I was introduced to, and I know I'm going to butcher her name, but she's an art historian, artist, and art educator, and her name is Frida Hai Wasingogo Tesfagoris. And she came up with, in the 80s, a theory that she called Afrofemcentrism, which was basically like Black feminism in terms of art. And what she said is Black women, and both Julie and Gail touched on this, that Black women artists create art in which they are the subject rather than the object, the exclusive or primary subject, active rather than passive, and sensitive to the self-recorded stories and realities of Black women. The work is imbued with the aesthetics of the African continuum, sustaining a personal vision that embraces Afrocentric tastes in color, texture, and rhythm. And I see that when I just look at Francine and Julie, in particular. When I just look at them, they look to me like walking work of Black women art. So I think that our story has been it needs to be amplified. There are so many Black women artists out there. I mean, women artists in general don't get the sort of critical feedback on their work that they need to get. Students I've worked with of color in the many colleges where I've taught have come to me and said, you know what, when I'm in critique, I don't get anything meaningful and I'm paying to be here. So I'm open to it. I think we need it because that's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think if our work is kind of a stepping up point for that to happen, I'm all for it. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are trying to, I mean, this was a great therapeutic project for us, you know, and as artists, we're just going to continue to make our work anyway. But the important part of it is sharing it with others and getting that feedback and starting the conversation. When you look at what's happening in our country, you know, people are so marginalized and so afraid, and, you know, having the conversation by decentering the things that get people all riled up by talking about it through this work of art, rather than me arguing with you, you know, about something, is one way to have that critical and meaningful dialogue to find common ground so people can communicate with each other. I think if we shied away from that, that would not be a great thing.
I also think as we get out there after we finish the books and start putting it out in the public through exhibitions and artist talks, I think it will open up opportunities for us to you know, encourage this dialogue.
And I think that the artwork kind of lures you in, it brings you in to the conversation, but there is a lot more behind it that we can't always get on paper. So that's why the blog is important, where you can see what we're thinking about, what we were inspired by, you know, things that worked, things that didn't work, and just, you know, kind of finding our way to resolve the problems. And so I think that's an important aspect of it too, that that people don't always get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did anyone else have anything to add? Jenny, do you, oh, okay, go ahead, sorry.
Me, Julie? Oh, okay. I just wanted to add that Aziza Gibson Hunter, one of the 9, had formed a group of women. This is before my time, but one where they got together to critique their work, and it grew into the Black Artists of DC, the BADC. And the need, the spiritual need, the cultural need, the conversations and the dialogues that we have around art are greater sometimes than the artwork itself. So I think it is happening. And I think that the members, that is another blessing that we have about this group, is they all come from those interesting dynamics. Certainly Pam and Adjoa and Gail bring a lot of the international intellectual process to the table. And Franny and I, kind of the folk artists of the group. But you know, all of them are very important and all of them are very valid. And this is a chance, and I think it would be wonderful to continue.
Sorry, guys, hold on. Jennifer DeBias is going to lead the Q&A, but there's something that's happened where she's not able to unmute, so I'm troubleshooting that right now. Okay. Jenny, you should be good now.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. My bad. What a wonderful, inspiring session, which is echoed by listener Karen Viola, who said exactly that, how inspiring it was. In the 10 or so minutes we have left, so many things to discuss. Karina asks the question, how do we encourage more feedback for Black women artists in response to Pam's comment about that?
Pam?
I think that the outlets are there, but maybe a lot of Black women artists just feel more comfortable being with each other. And I have to say that this has been an amazing thing for me, this Dandy 9 collective. But I think we need to find ways to push into those exhibition outlets that we don't maybe normally think about. Like we said, most of us here, our two artist colleagues who are in New York, but most of us are in the DC area. And so there is a lot of support for Black artists in the DC area. Julie mentioned BADC, which Aziza helped co-found, I believe. And there's lots of collectives like Adjoa mentioned, but those are very small, kind of localized things. I'm just wondering what we could do on a more national level. And perhaps it could be something through something like the Museum of Women in the Arts, or something that would bring more visibility to collectives like ours, people who aren't necessarily renowned Black women artists, but who do continue to make work and inspire others. So I think if there were a better platform, you know, that would invite us, that would make us feel comfortable and want to be there, that would be a big start, because then other people would hear our voices and learn about what we're doing and want to connect.
I also think as a result of the pandemic, I think it opened up a lot of arenas that were formerly closed to us. And also like more interaction between folks from different regions of the country and even internationally. You know, personally, I've gotten more invitations to do like artist talks and participate in panels and stuff like that than I ever have. And some of that has to do with the attention that has been given to systemic racism and, you know, some groups and organizations wanting to open up, you know, to other people. So I think there's promise there, and I think we just need to continue to put ourselves out there so that we can, you know, continue to tell our story.
It also occurred to me, actually, right after I said that was kind of a passive aggressive question. It's like, well, whereas like I heard a African American student make the comment about art school. It's like, no one ever gave me any useful feedback. Everyone they didn't see me, they passed over me. So I kind of want to apologize for that question, because it's like, it's really a question for, you know, the institutions, the powerful, you know, the people who have perhaps more power. So I hope that makes us some sense. Does anyone else have a comment on that, or shall I move on to a different question?
Well, I would like to speak on that, because even though, yeah, the institutions, we've been locked out for a long time, but we never give up. You know, we find ways to get together and to be creative and just kind of just work through the system, whatever it is. And so here we are. I mean, we just keep trying. And so, yeah, it's nice. Things seem to be opening up. I don't know for how long, but, you know, we have to take advantage of the situation as it, you know, unfolds.
I want to say, I think for us, because we are women of a certain age, that we have seen these cycles come and go. So like when I was entering college as a freshman, it was during the affirmative action time. So it was like, let's get as many people of color into this institution as possible, but we're not going to really do anything to support you. It's up to you to figure out how to hang out. I have gotten more job offers now at age 62, okay, because of the recent BML movement and all the stuff going on, like Adjoa mentioned. And it's like, wow. So, you know, and now I'm finally coming into, you know, people are recognizing, oh, we need more people like her, like these women here. working with us so that we can learn and be more responsive and inclusive. So it's just interesting.
Well, I love that you're talking about like the role of taking power that, when you have the faculty position, when you're on the board, when you're running the show, like that's where the real power is. It's not just, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Ms. Haskins.
No, that's power, but there's also the power in you. You can't count on the power outside. You have to have power inside. I was at the Corcoran in the late 60s. I didn't really learn anything there. Everything I learned I learned the basics, but everything I really learned about me and art is from the day-to-day living. And as I'm getting older, Pam, I'm getting a lot of requests for panels. I just got one yesterday from Kyra Hicks, who I illustrated a Black version of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. And I'm invited to do a presentation in July at the University of Santa Cruz. So, just things, if you keep doing what you're supposed to do and be authentic about who you are, your turn will come around. Nobody can take that away from you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. If I could make one follow-up question from a listener named Melise, a graphic design student for North Carolina. And she says, you're just talking about how important critique is. And I feel for myself, and definitely people of color in my section, that it can be hard to get constructive criticism. And she was wondering, what can she do to really kind of force it to really get what you need? Yes, please.
Okay, so because I'm in the university, I can speak to that because I actually am an art education professor, but I've always been the only faculty of color on every faculty that I've been on in terms of the art education faculty, at least. And I have students who'd come to me, not in my program, but they just see the face, right? And they know that I'm going to be able to hopefully talk with them about whatever they're interested in. And I will tell you this, where I just was before I got where I am now, there was a group of students, one of whom was an art education student. They just got tired of it. They got tired of being the one and only student in the class and not getting this critical feedback. And those students themselves formed a group called BASE. And that meant Black Art Students Empowered. And what they did was they wrote up a list of demands and they took it to the president's office. He sat down with them for 3 hours. And I got to tell you, as a result of that, and I will say this was VCU, so this is where Andrea is now. I will say as a result of that, because of all the other things that were going on, this must have been 2015, they made all these changes at VCU. They instituted programs to get more faculty of color on the campus. And I think part of the problem is, though, is the way that colleges are set up. If you're at an institution where people have tenure and they have been there for 30 years and they have been acting in this way the whole 30 years, the only way to make them change is to force them to or to force them out. And so I would say as a student, there's power in numbers. If there are at least a few people who are experiencing these same things, sometimes you just have to put it on the line. That's what they did when I was in college. You know, we marched on the president's house. We said, we want more Black faculty. That was like in the late 70s. And, you know, they didn't pay us much attention, but it still made us feel better and empowered to say, okay, we're going to speak about this, because if we sit there and say nothing, then we're not going to get anywhere. And we shouldn't put up with those crappy comments that people make either. I had a student who came to me a year ago and said that his faculty said, he was the only Black student in the class. He said, Michael, started calling him Michael Jackson because he felt like he looked like Michael Jackson. And so this person has power over you in terms of your grade. So what are you going to do? I would say go talk to somebody like me and help mediate it. But he waited until after that. He complied. So he started moonwalking and doing all these crazy things. And he felt horrible about it, you know, and he should. So I think, you know, we say we're going to do things, you know, as faculty, but we don't often think about the student perspective. And that's important. And the students need to have a voice because they are our future and they shouldn't put up with it. Sorry, but that's my thing. Don't put up.
Thank you. I hope a lot of students are listening in. Another person, Jazz Graff, speaks in the chat about how they created a feedback loop in grad school and held kind of and sent it to the department head, and apparently some changes were actually made. So yeah, definitely the role of proactivity is, I'm hearing that loud and clear. So it's 4:17, and in order to allow enough time for the next session to start, perhaps Karina could reshare the Zoom room hookup for the kind of offline conversation in case public and speakers did want to continue chatting for a little bit. There it is. Thank you, Karina. So hopefully you'll see that in the chat. I'm gonna turn it back over to Karina and then head on over to the new Zoom room and see what's going on there. Thank you all so much. I'm so honored to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you all. And I just want to sneak in one more comment that comes over from the printed matter page from Melise saying thank you so much for your presentation. And I think also for the great advice that you've just imparted. So like Jenny said, I do hope that a lot of young people, young students, publishers, artists are listening. And yeah. Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you so much, Francine. Thank you so much, Julie, Adjoa. Thank you so much, Pamela. And Andrea, thanks for moderating such a great discussion. It was such a pleasure.